Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. It's your old pal Tuna here, and today we are working with acrylic gouache to create the painting that you see on your screen. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about acrylic gouache. It's actually one of my favorite mediums. It is what it sounds like. It's sort of a mix between acrylic paint and gouache paint. The acrylic qualities being that once the paint is dry on the page, it cannot be reactivated with water, so it stays exactly where you put it. And it's like gouache in that it has a very matte finish, and you use varying amounts of water to create different textures and opacities with your paint. One of the major selling points of this particular kind of paint is its consistency. Because it has those gouache qualities, it can be manipulated with different amounts of water. That's also one of the super challenging things about it, is you need to work with the material in order to get sort of a feel for how much water you need to add in order to get certain textures. So as you can see, I like to use generally a pretty matte texture in my gouache paintings, and that just requires a tiny amount of water mixed with the paint before applying it, and then you get these really smooth edges and the paint just flows across the paper. It's fantastic. The main brands for for acrylic gouache are Holbein and Turner. They are pretty much the only two brands that are doing this particular type of paint. Like if you go to your local art shop, it's likely that you're only going to find the Holbein brand there. Holbein, I don't know. And unfortunately, it does tend to be a little bit on the pricier side, but let's be honest, what art supplies aren't? It's about $10 for a tube from Holbein. But not to worry, the paint tends to last for a really long time because you don't need a ton of paint, especially as you're going to be watering it down with water as you go. And depending on your technique, that might be a lot of water and not a lot of paint. And the nice thing about gouache is that, like any type of paint, you can mix all of your colors from a pretty limited palette. So if you want to pick up this particular type of material, you can start with maybe, I would say 2 to 5 colors. Definitely get some white, definitely get some black, and then either pick your primaries or some other palette that you enjoy working with. So overall, not a terribly huge investment to give this particular medium a go, and you can see if you like it. Now, one of the features about acrylic gouache, and I believe gouache in general, that tends to throw off beginners is when you are mixing your paint and you're mixing it with water, the paint has a glossy finish to it, which means that it reflects light differently than when the paint dries matte on the page. So you need to anticipate that your color is going to change slightly once it dries. And usually the rule is that light colors will dry a little bit darker than they appear when they're wet, and dark colors will dry a little bit lighter than they appear when they are wet. So just something to keep in mind. When it comes to my experience with this medium, I'm still kind of a freshman. I've only been using it for the last year or so, and that's after doing quite a bit of exploration with watercolor, which is a similar yet also entirely different type of paint. What I really love about gouache is that you can get these matte swaths of color that sort of imitate the way that digital art looks, or flat color cell shaded digital art. And I kind of call it like a paint by the numbers technique. So I'll do my sketch on the bottom and I'll be filling in each color as I go with the color that's supposed to be there, building up from flat layers and then adding some layers of shadow and texture where I deem them appropriate. Usually when I'm working on a painting like this, I will have some sort of digital composite that I'm referencing to show where each color is going to go. And if I don't have a digital composite, then what I'll do is I'll create a tiny little sketch somewhere on a scrap piece of paper and lay in some colors just to generally get an idea of what colors I want to go where. Because at the end of the day, this takes a very long time compared to something like digital art. And while I do have the power to go back and cover up colors and replace them with different colors, if I don't like the colors that I've chose for a certain area, it does take quite a long time, so I'm trying to optimize the process as much as I can. Real time, this illustration is about 3 to 3.5 hours, and again, that's not because I'm waiting for paint to dry, which is something about watercolor that I don't actually love, is that you really have to wait a long time between layers for the paint to dry, and if you don't, you end up like getting all these colors that are bleeding into each other, and like maybe that's what you're going for, but that's not usually what I'm going for. Anyway, a lot of the time that it takes to do these sorts of pieces is in really carefully laying down each patch of color. So it does require some patience, and of course with any type of medium, if you're trying something new, you are going to have to take some time to get to know the way that the paint works, and a lot of practice will go into getting to a certain point. So like I said, this is about a year of collected work for me. I still feel like I'm such a freshman, but this medium I feel like has so much flexibility because you can use it like a watercolor and have washes of color while mixed with this really beautiful, dense, luscious, opaque fill. I'll just talk a little bit about what's actually going on the screen right now as well. This is what's called dry brushing, and it's where you take I didn't add any water to the paint here, and I just applied it to my paintbrush, wiped off the excess, and went in with the dry brush to get this, well, I mean, I'm going for like a veil texture, so it's scratchy, I suppose, and that's what I did in order to use that technique. So you can see how diverse the gouache can be with the different weights that you use. Pretty cool, right? Pretty cool. The final touches that I end up adding here are, instead of using gouache to add my white highlights, which you could do, I use poster paint, and it's just a little bit of white poster paint. It's super, super opaque and thick, and I can just blop it on and rub it in the places where I want it to be. Pretty cool. Okay, I think that's all I have to say for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I am making prints of this piece. I actually just started a print club on my Patreon. You can hop on over there. $25 tier gets you this print as a postcard, a sticker sheet, and a separate sticker as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!